living and growing up in my community of Sweetgrass First Nation, there was things that I was taught that I thought were normal to many people. But as I got older, I realized that some of the things, they weren't passed down to certain families. And there were certain things that I noticed that some families had to go through that we didn't have to go through, but there was also vice versa. Now, one of the things that you probably notice in this country is that the thing that has fast-tracked a lot of this discussion is what's happened here earlier this year with the uncoverings of the Indian residential school bodies that were found in many of these sites across the country. It's created a discussion. It's created a dialogue. It's created a sense of urgency to try to fix this stuff. Because in the past, we'll be very honest, a lot of this stuff was swept under the rug, so to speak. And now it's coming out and it's right in our face, and we have to do something about it. You and I have an opportunity to change this dialogue in this country for our children, our grandkids, their kids, and so on. Very first teaching I want to share with you today, ladies and gentlemen. In our culture, I'm Nahio, so that means I'm a Plains Cree man. When I come from being raised and being taught by elders as a kid, the teaching they would say to us is that what you do today is not just for you, Kendal. It's not just for you. It's for the people who are going to come after you. Your kids, your grandkids, and if you're blessed to see great-great-grandkids, that's for them. The decisions you make today, the decisions that you and I make today as business leaders, as organizations, we have to think like that. This is the future of how we're going to be thinking in this country. Not for immediate gain, but who's to come after us. That's very powerful. And as a kid, I didn't really understand what I was being taught. But as I got older, I would see a lot of the things come out, and a lot of these teachings come into to this worldview that we're now living in. And in this moment right now, it's needed. Much of this Indigenous knowledge is needed to repair a lot of the stuff that's happening in our country. We look at this thing, even such as climate change, that some would call it. This is a reaction to what's happening and the stuff that we've done as human beings to create havoc on our environment, on Mother Earth, which we could call a spirit. It's our mother, takes care of us, gives us medicine. In our culture, there's a medicine for every single ailment that's in this natural world. There's people out there who are spiritually gifted with the gift of foresight, the gift of medicine picking to help cure ailments, to help cure certain cancers, diabetes, and so on. There's people like that. And they've been here for thousands of years, being passed down through bloodline to bloodline. It's been passed down through oral stories. Many of the things I'm sharing with you have been passed down through stories. I couldn't read it in a book. I had to be taught it. And so I'm teaching it to you so that when you go to your organization, your staff members, your leaders, and so on, you are able to pass it on to them so that when they get an understanding of much of the stuff, they'll be able to come at the table together. There won't be a lot of assumptions anymore because they took the time to understand that story. The thing that creates a lot of negativity in our country, in our organizations, is when two people come together, they're standing side by side, and there's all this assumptions, right? They haven't taken time to understand each other's stories. So think of it as a person, for example, an Indigenous person, non-Indigenous, back and forth fighting or no talking at all, because there hasn't been an established dialogue of understanding between each other. Many of you probably can relate to this. You grew up in the educational system and you learned about everything non-Indigenous in this country, all the stuff that happened before our time. And now at this present moment, you're probably wondering why your children are getting this education, but you never did. I was in the same boat. I never learned this stuff until university, much of the history. I grew up with the spirituality, but I didn't hear about a lot of the history until I left my community and I went to university and so on. And so now we're backtracking because we have this huge gap in our workforce that needs to understand this stuff. Because when there's lack of understanding, it creates assumptions, it creates problems, it creates ignorance, it creates prolonged racism, which affects our productivity as a workforce. We have to fill that gap. How do we do that? Understanding each other's story.